Today, ladies, we are talking about loving ourselves, no matter any imperfections, no matter how many times you've messed up. Our scripture comes from Song of Songs 4 and 7, and it reads, "You are absolutely beautiful, my darling. There is no imperfection in you." God created us to love Him and to love others. But to be able to love others properly, we must first know how to love ourselves. You can't give what you don't have. And that's part of the problem. We aren't loving ourselves properly. Ephesians 5 and 29 tells us, "For no one ever hates his own flesh, but provides and cares for it, just as Christ does for the church." As part of caring for ourselves, loving ourselves, we need to monitor the people and the situations that we allow to have a place in our lives. I know hard times come and things happen, but at the end of the day, if you have just a small bit of control, if it's possible to control it, we have to try as much as we can to keep the nonsense that attempts to come into our lives, to keep it out. What do I mean by nonsense? Nonsense is anything that is going to cause unnecessary stress or worry in your life. Merriam-Webster defines nonsense as foolish or meaningless words, ideas, or actions. So all of that stuff is considered nonsense, foolishness. Now, I know we can't avoid everything, but the things that we can avoid, the things that we can keep out, we need to. If we can avoid some nonsense or some foolishness, we need to do our best to make sure that that happens. Ladies, we have to practice self-care as often as possible. And we cannot cause ourselves, or for that matter, allow someone to cause any unnecessary worry in our lives. Life is enough. We don't need anything else added to that. But unfortunately, as women, we sometimes get to the point where we feel like we have to accept whatever comes our way, whatever is offered or given to us. I truly believe that we feel this way due to the flaws that we have or that we think we have. We feel like because we have these flaws that we don't deserve to love ourselves properly. We don't deserve to love ourselves fully. And that's just not true. Few flaws that I want to discuss with you today is number one is our shortcomings. Number two is our past. And number three is a complete lack of knowledge. So our first flaw would be our shortcomings. And when I say shortcomings, I'm talking about either what we look like, our outer appearance. Also, our shortcomings can have to do with our health. So with the things inside of us, going on inside of us. Now, ladies, I know how we are. We all look at ourselves in the mirror at some point or another and say things like, "I wish my thighs were a little smaller." Or, "If only I was 3 inches taller, I would be perfect." But understand this. Just because my thighs are big, or maybe I have some illness, maybe I have some issues with my kidneys, maybe I have epilepsy, that does not mean that I have to shortchange myself. Some women think and are truly fearful that, well, I have this flaw or I have this issue, I'm broken, I'm less than. No one's going to want to be with someone like me. I have to accept anyone who's willing to put up with me. Listen. God says that you are beautiful just the way that you are. He created us on purpose with all the things that we don't like about ourselves. God looks at us and calls us his masterpiece. Our second flaw as women is our past. We hold our past against us sometimes more than other people do. And if you're like me, you've done some things in your life that you wish you wouldn't have, or you wish you would have done some of those things differently. There are some things that happen that are out of our control. Things like being molested, like I was as a kid. Other things I could have controlled. For example, when I had both of my children, I wasn't married to either one of their fathers. Because of these things, I could easily feel like I'm damaged goods and I don't deserve all the best that God has for me. I might settle. Actually, I did settle for a huge part of my life. This settling that I was doing and that many of you may have done, it's a subconscious thought. I didn't go around telling myself that I didn't deserve better, but it showed all in my actions. It showed in the way that I allowed people to treat me. It showed in the things that I accepted. I'm a true believer that people can only do to us what we allow. The nonsense that I talked about earlier, yeah, I accepted and dealt with a lot of that. I allowed men to treat me any kind of way. They were disrespectful, they lied, they cheated, and I continued to give them the go ahead. I continued to make them feel like it was okay in my actions. And that is a huge flaw that we have as women. Again, back to that nurturing thing that we talked about last week. We're naturally nurturing, so we want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But at some point, we have to open our eyes and see it for what it is. Our third and final flaw is that we just didn't know. We had a lack of knowledge. We were never taught to love ourselves. In some families, the women are taught to believe or understand that men can do whatever they want to do, and the women have to accept it. This teaching wasn't necessarily given to them verbally, where they sat down and said, okay, girl, you have to accept everything the man does. It wasn't like that, but it was taught through the actions of the older women in the families. It was shown in the actions of these older women and how they dealt with their husbands and or their significant others. In some families, the men are allowed to cheat. It was acceptable for them to have more than one family. This mentality, in my opinion, has set up a lot of women to accept things that they should never deal with. It's taught them to accept the bare minimum in relationships. Instead of teaching ourselves, our daughters, our nieces, our cousins, that this type of behavior is acceptable, we have to teach them to first love God. And the very next thing we have to teach them is to love themselves and show them that they are beautiful inside and out, that they are worthy of all that God has for them. Also, especially with social media, we have to teach them that just because somebody is appearing to be beautiful on the outside, it doesn't mean that they're at peace with themselves and happy on the inside. We can't beat ourselves up based on what we didn't know. There's no way for you to do better if you didn't know better. So what I want to do is give you 3 ways that you can begin to love yourself. Number 1 is care for yourself. We need to take some time to get to know ourselves. You need to take some time to get to know you. You need to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what's acceptable, and what's not acceptable. This figuring out process, it has to be done on your own, not while you're in a relationship and not with your girlfriend in your ear saying, girl, I would not deal with this and I would not. You have got to figure it out for yourself. The second way that you can begin loving yourself is to respect yourself. Now, some of you might be like, well, how can I do that? The number 1 way to respect yourself is to set boundaries. Not everyone should have an all access pass to you. If you haven't read the blog titled Free Trial, make sure you go do that after you finish this video. So set boundaries, the main way to respect yourself. Because if you don't respect yourself, nobody else will. The third and final way for you to begin loving yourself is to have a sense or to learn about your sense of self-worth. What is self-worth? Self-worth is the feeling that you are a good person and that you deserve to be treated with respect. That is self-worth. You do not have to settle. You don't have to accept what's given to you if it's outside of your boundaries. Know that God created you and He does not make any mistakes. Remember, you are His masterpiece. Despite all of the mess ups, the shortcomings, the lack of knowledge, we have to remember that yes, we are flawed, but we are worthy.